A girl is being dragged on a red carpet by two guards, and the citizens are just watching. She is then thrown on the red carpet and is laying on her belly. One of the citizens yells and tells everyone that she is evil and cruel for killing Abe and how Abe did nothing wrong. Abe was this girl's cousin. The citizen then goes on saying that she should suffer the same way as Abe. Suddenly, the emperor arrives to calm the citizen down. However, she is not able to, as Abe was her child. She questions the emperor on how he has such a composed look as Abe was his son. The emperor then lets everyone know on how the girl laying on the ground is the emperor's sister and how there must be a misunderstanding. But the citizen named Emma still wants her revenge. The blonde-haired girl has been falsely accused for killing a child, and a series of accusations have been placed on her. She is guilty of many crimes, and her brother, who is named Lawrence, knows most of them. She states on how this was a conspiracy that was planned by Emperor Lawrence. The emperor approaches her and stops right in front of her. He then states on how he can't believe she killed him. We also learn that the girl's name is Tia. The citizen then yells, stating on how Abe threw up black blood and died after Tia's maid arrived. We then see the guards bringing the maid, and they throw her right beside Tia. The emperor then asks the maid if she was given orders to give poison to Abe by Marchioness Rosen. The maid accuses Rosen for killing Abe first and how he had the intention of killing the emperor next. The citizens are all shocked, and the emperor asks Tia if she has anything to say. Tia starts to get up and states on how the emperor is the one and only who has authority in this empire. He is carrying the empire on his shoulders and how he needs to quit his habit of placing the blame on others. That is her last advice as the guard suddenly rushes at her to grab her and throw her again. The guards then start dragging her and plan to lock her up. After the whole commotion outside, we see her hands tied up and is sitting on a chair. She gets tortured and forced to sign some papers. A trial also happens with the participation of a few nobles and the emperor. The emperor then states that his sister should still be punished since the crime is too severe to be forgiven. The punishment he gives her is for her tongue and hands to be cut as she talked this way and ruined the country. Her hands are also stained with innocent blood, and this will be an example for others. The royal guard then goes to grab Tia's hand. He then gets ready to swing his axe to chop them off. In the next scene, we see that she is locked up and her hands have been cut off. She then starts to remember on what her mother said on how to make her brother to do well so that she can do well. Tia's mother was Morella, the wife of Marquis Rosen. Under the imperial's law, married people could not have an affair with unmarried people. Those in power married those they liked and left them by their side. Michael Rosen lent the emperor his wife, Marchioness Rosen, in exchange for a sapphire mine. After that, she gave birth to the emperor's son, which was Lawrence. However, Tia was not the daughter of the royal family. She would constantly get bullied for this from citizens for being an illegitimate child. The citizens tell her on how she should not have been born. Her mother also tells her to be nice to her brother and how she is still alive because of him. She was told to live for her brother and how he has to be an emperor so that they can survive. The only time Tia would get praised would be when it is something beneficial for her brother Lawrence. She knew her mother's kindness would never be directed at her. But it was difficult for her to take a hold of the desire to be loved and had been built up since she was young. The family was all tied by blood. If Lawrence lost, then they would all die together. There has never been a case where the family of one's former enemy for the throne had been left alive. Tia had a talent for evil acts and conspiracies. She framed loyal servants to kill them and ruin the political state of the empire. There were many more trivial evil acts committed within the palace. She also made the citizens suffer and killed countless people from her actions. It was all done for her brother Lawrence. She knew that this was just an excuse. She committed countless acts calmly and indifferently. Lawrence was finally able to wear the crown. Tia was the top contributor for making her brother the emperor, but she quietly backed out, not wishing for anything, only because she was afraid. This was also the reason on why she disbanded the information guild that she had created over a long time with a huge amount of money. She thought that she would be allowed to live since they had worked together up till now. But She knew too much, and she had committed to many sins. So her tongue and hands were cut so that she can't speak and would not be able to leave records. She was Lawrence's dog. Tia then starts laughing. She knows the crime she has committed and does not want to be acknowledged as a pure person or be forgiven. She starts to remember on how she had asked Leisha, the saintess, if she resented her. Tia threatened her and forced her to marry Lawrence. She believed that she would definitely resent her, but that was not the case as she had already forgiven Tia. All of the citizens of the empire were happy to hear that the saintess would become the crown princess. On Lawrence's coronation, the flowers given to the empress piled around the palace walls like a mountain. A woman born from a poor barony in the northern borders became someone who could afford all the luxury in the world. However, after marriage, her beautiful golden hair, which had a glint of red in it, had lost its glow and became pale and dry. Her thick red lips had lost their color. Tia was responsible for this as she pushed her into this hell. She had sworn to protect at least Leisha, but was not able to. Lawrence always had abusive tendencies. He was also quite sensitive about his legitimacy to the throne. The combination of those two brought forth his hate and sense of inferiority against his new queen, who was praised by the masses. Leisha began to wither away, isolated and abused in a prison adorned with gold. Leisha's holy power was strong enough to revive someone from the brink of death, but it was useless against her own illness. Leisha never blamed Tia for this, as she was the one who had chosen to marry Lawrence. She mentions that she has forgiven Tia and how she should take her off the great burden that is on Tia's shoulders. Lucia continues saying on how, if Tia ever meets Lord Cedric, tell him that Leisha had lived and passed on with no regrets. Tia agrees she will, and Leisha apologizes to her that she was not able to save her. Those were her last words as she passed away. We then see Tia still locked up in prison and she has no sense of time anymore. She suddenly hears a voice stating that she deserves this. The voice turns out to be Vinya, who was Leisha's maid who had come to visit her. She grabs Tia by the hair and tells her how there is not much left of the great and mighty Emperor Schemer. Her only regret is that she is not able to kill Tia right now. She then breaks her cuffs and starts to kidnap her. Tia was not thinking properly in her hazy state of mind. She knew she was being transported somewhere, but she couldn't tell where or for what. Tia was carried onto a laundry wagon, then dragged out of the imperial palace elsewhere. She wakes up and sees Lord Cedric watching over her. Lord Cedric did not expect that the greatest schemer in all of the empire was not able to save herself. Tia was surprised that she was in Cedric's military camp and was wondering why he had saved her. She had once blown up an embankment on the Ava River in order to frame Lord Cedric. During that time, Cedric was on his way back from organizing matters at the Empire's western borders, as per the Emperor's orders, but he didn't return to the capital city and instead developed his army to block the incoming flood. Since he had disobeyed an imperial order, the Emperor began to suspect him, which ended up leading him to be a fugitive who was running from the Emperor. Cedric then kneeled to the ground before Tia and started begging her for her help to put an end to Lawrence's tyranny. He believed he can achieve anything as long as Tia still has her determination. Tia starts remembering all of the things she had seen in the wagon on her way to the camp. The fertile town of Barkey, known for producing the greatest wine in all of the empire, no longer existed. According to Vinia, this had happened because someone from Barkey had planned an assassination attempt with Archduke Roigar. There were countless other places that suffered the same fate. Cedric continued by telling Tia to devise a plan. He wanted to take down Lawrence, no matter what it took. But currently, the power difference between their forces is far too great. His forces are only aware of how to deal with military affairs. They have no knowledge on how to reduce the gap. Tia started to shake as she has never heard such words even from Lawrence, to whom she had sworn her loyalty to for all her life. She wanted to have no regrets up until the day she dies. That is what she had decided when she had first dirtied her hands with blood. Cedric begins to stand up and believes that even Tia is not able to come up with a plan to overcome the current situation, as the power imbalance is far too great. As Lord Cedric is leaving, He tells Tia that he will assign some of his men to escort her to a rural village where she can live the rest of her days there in peace. Even though Tia had no plan, she did know that there was one way to fix things, which was by an ancient magic circle. It has been a long time since magic had disappeared from the world. Human sacrifices were one of the reasons on why the use of magic declined, but it was also because only a few people knew how to draw a magic circle properly. But for Tia, this was no problem. Since it is too late to set things right in the current timeline, Tia decides to go back in time before this had all occurred. She bites whatever is remaining of her tongue to draw blood. This was Tia's only chance. Tia is exhausted after she is done creating the magic circle with her bloody tongue. She knew that she was the perfect human sacrifice. Suddenly, Lord Cedric runs into the tent after seeing the bright light that was emitting from it. He is shocked and surprised on what is happening. As Tia is about to make everything go back in time, she prays that in her next life she can fulfill Cedric's wish. That is what she thought. However, she had returned back in time too and was alive and well. Tia was confused and thought that she might have misinterpreted the magic. It was supposed to turn back time in exchange for her life, but somehow she is still alive. Regardless of what the reason or issue is, she knew that there must be a reason on why she is still alive. However, one thing was for certain for Tia. She was ready to once again dirty her hands for Lord Cedric. She reads one of her notebooks and finds out that she turned 18 8 days ago. This made Tia realize that she only has 2 years before she turns 20, which is when she can inherit the Marquessate of Rosen. Tia is sitting at the breakfast table with her mom and Lawrence. Tia is impatient and wants to find out how the current situation is outside. As she rises up to go outside, her mother questions her on why she's already getting up since her brother hasn't even finished half of his meal. She tells her mother that she does not feel like eating, but her mother says to mind her table manners. She ignores her mother and then asks her brother Lawrence if it is okay with him for her to visit the temple in the outskirts of the city. Lawrence lets her with no hesitation. She thanks him, and as she is leaving, her mom praises Lawrence for being so considerate of his sister. She shuts the door behind her, and as she is thinking, someone is approaching her and calls out to her. It turns out to be Elsie, who is her maid. She was the first maid Tia had taken under her wing, but due to her unfailing loyalty, she ended up being poisoned in Tia's stead. Elsie asks her if everything is all right, but Tia tells her it is nothing. Tia then tells Elsie that she will be heading to the temple. Elsie smiles, but before Tia leaves, she whispers something into Elsie's ear. She goes back into her room and starts to get ready with the help of her other maid named Sophie. Sophie asks her how she wants her hair done. At first, Tia says neatly, but then changes her mind and says to make it pretty. From this answer, Sophie starts to smile and jokes around with her that she is now at that age too. She believes she wants to look pretty so that she can date cool men. Tia tells her not to say such nonsense as she is just going to the temple. But Sophie says to her that she is looking forward to it, which she denies. Sophie starts to tell Tia on how the spotlight now belongs to her, considering how old her mother has gotten. Suddenly, Tia's mother shows up, which catches Sophie off guard. Tia's mother then questions Tia if she is going to go seduce men with her ugly face. Tia responds to her stating that she is just going to the temple. She questions her mother on what good it would do to seduce a priest. Tia continues by asking how her brother was supposed to go out today. Tia's mother responds back stating on how he has already left and hopes he does not get bewitched by some sly, foxy girl. Tia assures her not to worry as he is a wise person. Her mother agrees with her and says that he is different from most men. However, her mother is worried since men change when they find their romantic partners. They tend to forget about their own mothers. She then questions Tia if she would ever be like that. Tia at first hesitates, but then tells her that she will always stay by her side. Her mother replies by stating how, of course, she will as she is her daughter. Sophie is finally done making Tia's hair. Her mom giggles and as she is leaving, tells Tia to enjoy her outing. She also tells her to offer donations and refresh herself, which Tia agrees to. Her mother slams the door shut, which changes the atmosphere of the room. Sophie asks Tia if she is all right, which Tia responds to stating on how this is a common occurrence. Sophie then helps Tia put her dress on. Sophie tells her on how she looks so lovely, but her hair is a bit curled, so she will straighten it out soon for her. Tia thought the word lovely seemed so strange, and it does not fit her. Elsie notices Tia and tells how she looks so pretty today. Sophie tells Tia that it would be great if she always went around like this. She tells them not to flatter her as it won't get them anywhere. She then leaves the house, and the only thing on her mind is to start changing the future, which starts now. Meanwhile, we get to see what the current situation is at the barracks on the outskirts of the capital of the Krates Empire. One of Lord Cedric's men is telling him not to be stubborn and to hold a victory celebration. His Majesty is trying to separate Lord Cedric from the Western Army. His men want to hold a victory celebration for the Evron Order and not invite the Western Army. We find out the name of this man is Frail. Lord Cedric tells him on how the Western Army have suffered for over a year on low wages. They deserve the glory too, and that riches aren't important. He continues stating on how if it was a resounding victory without glory and honor to unite them, the Western Army will be dissolved. And if the West collapses, the whole empire will be at risk. Frail questions him on what he will do then, which Cedric replies by stating on how he was going to ask the Archbishop to mediate. He continues saying he has to try something and that he had an unsettling dream, so he was going to visit the temple either way. Frail questions him about the dream, to which Cedric tells him that it was of a woman. The woman was crying without a word till her whole face was drenched in tears. Cedric felt like some part of his heart was being squeezed by seeing her like that. In a lot of ways, the dream left a bitter aftertaste in his mouth. They start to head to the temple on their horses when suddenly a carriage comes in the middle of their way. Frail asks the butler what the issue is, to which the butler replies, saying that the carriage's wheel fell out. He starts to help the butler to fix the wheel. Tia starts to thank Cedric for the help. As Cedric is replying to her, he realizes that it's the woman from his dream. They managed to finish the repairs, and Tia apologizes to Cedric for delaying his journey. Frail tells her not to apologize as it's only natural to help those in need. He continues by telling her that she looks like a noble lady. It is dangerous for her to travel about without a guard. She tells him that she is only on a midday trip to the temple. As she turns around, Lord Cedric is still staring at her. He then bows his head as she is getting back on the carriage. He opens the door for her and offers his hand to help her get on. He tells her to please get on. She is a bit shy at first, but then grabs his hand for assistance. She then slowly lets go of his hand once she is safely seated in the carriage. The door then closes as both of them are still staring at one another through the window. They are finally about to arrive to the temple. Tia keeps taking a peek at Cedric on his horse. Once they arrive, Tia gets off the carriage and continues to look at Cedric from behind. The priest welcomes her, and Tia thanks him for coming to meet her. She tells him on how she has brought a scented wax candle that she wishes to offer the saint. He tells her to come with him and how the saint will be pleased with her kind offering. Once inside the temple, she kneels down and starts to pray and ask for forgiveness. She asks to be forgiven since she attempted to sacrifice her body in exchange. She also prays for him to watch over the foolish and wicked Grand Duke Cedric. Lastly, she asks that he protect the saintess daughter, Lisha. The priest then asks her if she would like to meet the bishop. Tia tells him that there is no need as she is leaving to rest and have some tea. The priest tells her that he will prepare a gazebo for her. Tia wishes to request for one more thing. She continues stating on how some knights helped her on the way here today. She wanted to thank them and wanted him to lead her maid to them. The priest takes the coins from Tia and agrees. We then see Tia at the gazebo. Cedric shows up to the gazebo. She stands up and suggests on how they should introduce one another. She tells him that she is Artesia Rosen. He questions her if she is Marchioness Roseanne's daughter, to which she replies that she is. Cedric questions her on how, if she knew that he was the Grand Duke of Evron and deliberately broke her carriage so that they could meet, then she should also know that he dislikes the Marchioness Roseanne. She confirms that she knows. He then asks her how it is possible that a noble woman's carriage wheel would fall off like that. He continues stating that Tia even handed lunchboxes to the knights, as if she planned it from the start. Tia tells him that this necessary for her to do as she needs to tell him something. Cedric begins to think in his head that she is the woman in his dreams, but unlike the dream, her eyes are cool and bright. He agrees to listen to her and hopes that whatever she has to say is worth his time that she is wasting. She thanks him. Tia starts to pour some tea for Cedric as he sits down to talk. Cedric was curious on why the Marchioness Rosen's daughter was acting like this towards him. He decides to first drink his tea and see what she has to say. She then stands and tells the Grand Duke for him to please propose for her hand in marriage. Cedric starts to cough as he could not believe what he just heard. He never thought that he would hear such words from a young miss that he had just met today. Tia responds by stating that she is not asking for a real marriage. She only asked for this in order for them to solve a problem that Cedric has been struggling with. She continues stating on how Cedric and His Majesty have been in a stalemate for 2 months because of issues regarding the victory celebration. It's a problem that the ill cannot receive proper treatment, but because of that, one wrong move and both the Western and Southern Army structure could collapse. Dia knew that this is what concerns Cedric. She tells him that he has likely come here to request that the Archbishop mediate. He confirms, to which Tia tells him that this is a very unwise decision. Even if the Archbishop agrees to mediate, Cedric will give away his glory. Cedric will have to give all the glory to the Western Army. Cedric believes that it would be for the best, as one does not require merit to succeed. Tia tells him that someone must lead the Western Army. Others would be outraged if they heard that the Majesty replaced the true hero with another man during the victory celebration. She continues stating that the general will be disappointed and abandon the Western Army, and how His Majesty greatly favors her brother. But she believes her brother lacks the nobles' support. When the fight for the throne begins, that will surely be her brother's undoing. His Majesty is finding this regrettable as of right now. This is why Tia believes that Cedric is the ideal person to support her brother's legitimacy, as he is also in the line of succession. Cedric was the owner of both the North and influential in the West. Cedric understands what she is saying and states that he has no intention of colluding or begging for the recognition that the soldiers rightfully deserve. He then starts to stomp away, but Tia grabs his hand. She then asks him about the village of conspirators at the Grand Duchy. Cedric takes it as a threat. She tells him that she is just offering him advice with the utmost sincerity. She then pours him another cup of tea as he sits back down. As she is serving the tea, she tells Cedric that he must seek more practical profit. Cedric questions her if practical profit is obtained by using underhanded and unjust methods for the sake of winning. She clarifies that Cedric is throwing away his own honor in order to preserve the Western Army's and Grand Duke Everon's reputation. She continues by stating on how her mother and brother do not know about this meeting. Sabotaging the carriage's wheel was not so that she could deceive Cedric. It was a tactic used to deceive onlookers. It is common for men and women to meet by chance and fall in love. She tells Cedric to tell them that he is resigning from the power struggle with the Emperor and returning to the capital because he has fallen in love with her. He can then propose to her. If he marries her, His Majesty will be less wary of your grace. Cedric starts to think about it and asks Tia if this will protect the Grand Duke. He also asks her what she will gain from this marriage. If it's not to force him to take her brother's side through a political marriage, what is the reason for it? She tells him that she wants to receive the inheritance from Marquess Rosen and become independent. She can only inherit at the age of 20, but she is currently only 18 years old. She continues stating that for the next 2 years, her mother has control of Marquess Rosen's property. Cedric tells her that with a guardian's consent, she can marry, and after marrying, she will be recognized as an adult. Tia agrees to this, but if she goes and picks just anybody to marry, her mother will have no reason to forfeit. She would rather kill off her prospective husband than to have her married off. This is why she believes Cedric would be the best candidate for her. Cedric asks if she plans on betraying her mother and brother. She tells him on how she is just a tool and that if a tool just ends up in someone else's hands, people will not consider it betrayal. Tia requests for protection and be legally married to Cedric for just 2 years. If Cedric does this favor for her, she will make Cedric the emperor. Cedric slams his cup down on the table and starts to get angry. He asks Tia if she is trying to plant treasonous ideas into him. She replies by telling him that she is just simply talking about succession and questions him on how it's treasonous. She continues stating that the emperor still hasn't named a crown prince as of yet, and how he has the right to the throne. If Cedric wishes for the citizens of the Krait's empire to live in peace, then he must ascend the throne as the emperor. She tells Cedric on how Lawrence is cruel, and behind the scenes, Roygar is greedy. If they were to ascend the throne, the empire will become a living hell. He bangs his hand on the table as he gets up and tells Tia that he can't listen to this anymore. He starts to leave, and Tia believes that he requires some more time to think this through. Elsie then dashes to Tia and asks if she is okay. Tia asks with what, to which Elsie replies on how Cedric got angry and just left, which was also really scary. She tells her that it was to be expected. As nightfall is approaching, Elsie asks Tia if she would like to return home now, to which Tia responds saying to wait a little longer as she takes another sip of her tea. Elsie starts to wonder why, as Cedric has already left. Suddenly, someone calls out to them. He mentions that his name is Benjamin Corner, who is from the Western Army. He has come to escort Tia of the Rosen household home under the orders of the Grand Duke Evron. Elsie is happy to hear this, and they start to leave as it is now nighttime. On their way home, they are stopped by 2 men on their horses. The coachman stops the carriage. Tia asks the coachman on what is wrong, to which he tells her that they have stopped them for an inspection. One of the men that stopped them asks what a Western Army member is doing here as he notices the Western Army's uniform. Benjamin salutes him and then tells them on how he is a knight of the 4th Corps in the Western Army. He was assigned to escort Tia by Grand Duke Evron. He is surprised to hear this and then goes to check on Tia. Tia seems to know him and calls him Sir Kishore. He asks her where she is returning from at this hour. Tia tells him that she was on her way back from the temple and lost track of time. Kishore then questions her on why she is with a Western Army soldier, to which she tells him on how the carriage broke on her way to the temple and how the Grand Duke was passing by, helped her. He also knew that she didn't have an escort, so he lent her Benjamin. He understands on what Tia has said and then tells her on how it seems like Tia is all grown up now. She starts to blush in front of him. Sir Kishore decides to escort her home. Benjamin then starts to take his leave, but then Tia tells him to stay for a cup of tea before leaving. He tells her that there is no need and that there is nothing safer than a royal guard escorting someone home. His mission is done, and he will now be returning, to which Tia agrees and thanks him. Once Benjamin is gone, Tia starts to tell Sir Kishore on how she received prayer candles today after praying at the temple. She wants to send some to his daughter, Miel. He smiles and thanks her for her concern. Tia states that she hopes to go on a picnic with him and Miel once she is better, to which Sir Kishore tells Tia on how lately she has been bugging him a lot. She smiles and tells him on how she is sure she doesn't mean to. Sir Kishore chuckles and says that he hopes this is true. Tia realizes that since Sir Kishore is here, this means that His Majesty was also here. She has finally arrived back home. Once inside, she tells her maid Alice to give the pouches that they prepared as gifts to each of the Emperor's aides. Alice tells her that this would mean they will be using everything that was prepared. Tia tells Alice that this is all right. She then stops in front of the Emperor's room and gives the guards a pouch of money. She then tells them to please tell the Emperor on how the daughter of Mirella has come to greet him. The guards tell her to go inside. Before Tia goes inside, she asks that if a guest comes over while she is inside, to please inform her first. The guards are a little confused upon hearing this. Tia clarifies by stating that she just doesn't want the Emperor and her mother's time together, to be interrupted. She will handle it if there is a guest. They bow and tell her, of course, to which then Tia enters the room as the guards shut the door behind her. Tia then bows down to the emperor and tells him on how honored she is that he has come to visit. He smiles and tells her on how she has grown so much since the last time he had seen her. He continues stating on how she would be prettier if she looked more like her mother. Her mother agrees to this and tells him on how he knows how to appreciate beauty. He then asks her how old she is, to which Tia responds that she is 18. His Majesty tells her that she has now blossomed into a woman and how it's time to start looking for a suitable husband for her. Her mother stops him and tells him that she just turned 18. His Majesty tells Tia's mother that she should be engaged before she turns 20, even though she wants her daughter by her side forever. He continues stating that, as the emperor, he is capable of finding someone suitable for Tia. He doesn't want her living with her brother forever. Tia thanks him. Suddenly, a guard appears and whispers to Tia that a guest has arrived. The emperor asks Tia to continue what she was saying, but she excuses herself and takes her leave. As she is leaving, the guard tells her that Countess Eunice is outside making a scene. She wants to see the emperor. Tia tells the guard that she will deal with it. The guard asks her if she knew she was coming, which Tia tells him that she did. She starts to head to Eunice, and her shouting can be heard all over the house. Tia arrives at the entrance and questions Eunice on why she is here. Eunice raises her hand and suddenly slaps Tia across the face. Tia is surprised on what just happened, including the emperor's servants. Eunice tells Tia to call her mother here, to which Tia replies, stating that she is quite thoughtless. Eunice questions her on what she means. Tia tells her that all of the emperor's servants saw Eunice slap her so callously. She hesitates and asks her, "So what?" To which Tia replies that the emperor despises noisy people. She continues stating on how a man does not want to see his daughter while he's with his mistress. She's not even a young child, but a married daughter with a child of her own. Eunice starts to shiver as she hears this. Tia starts to threaten her, stating that if she were to cry and make a fuss for this pain and humiliation, the emperor will come out. Her mother would also not miss this chance to cry and complain about the disrespect that Eunice has shown her. Eunice starts to scream, stating on how dare she try to threaten her. Tia tells Eunice that the harsher Eunice treats her mother, the more the emperor will feel sympathy for her. Tia confirms if she still wants to go through with this. Tia tells her to just go back. Eunice questions her authority and how, if she is so confident about this, why doesn't she go ahead and try? Tia states that she shouldn't compete with her father's mistress for his love. If she wishes to push out her mother, then she should accept being loved in a different way. She continues telling Eunice on how His Majesty cherished her as a daughter and even used to greatly favor her. She should make him recall those memories and be adored as his precious daughter again. Eunice is confused on why she is saying all of this. Tia tells her that she will forget about today's events if she goes back. No parent wants their child to catch them with their mistress. Tia then turns around and asks the royal guard if he can escort Eunice back to her residence. The guard confirms if this is all right, to which Tia states that they shouldn't interrupt His Majesty while he's resting. Tia reminds Eunice not to forget her words and to go back. She decides to listen and starts to go back with the guard. As she is going back, we learn that Tia believes that Countess Eunice is the perfect person to push out Tia's mother, even though she does not have as much influence as her. She just can't get on the emperor's bad side. The emperor hears about his daughter coming to see him and is rushing down the stairs. He realizes that she has left and Tia is the only one standing there. His Majesty asks Tia for forgiveness, to which Tia bows and says that nothing happened. She elaborates, stating on how his daughter had made a small mistake because she misses her father. She can't hold that against His Majesty nor the Countess. Tia's mother starts to get angry as she has heard about Eunice slapping Tia. Tia starts to defend Eunice, stating on how she can sympathize with her as she never had a father figure. Her longing for a father must have led her to do it by impulse. Tia states that as the Marquess's heir, she will ensure that your Majesty's stay here is comfortable. There's no need to make a big fuss over something this trivial. His Majesty tells her Hart is commendable, but him and Tia's mother are responsible for how Charlotte was raised. He believes on how they have spoiled her too much, so she's developed a violent temper. She has 3 children now, so it is about time that she became more amiable. His Majesty was speechless that she made a mark on Tia's face. He told her she can ask for anything, as it shall be a birthday gift for her. Tia asks for forgiveness and wants His Majesty to accept a gift that she has prepared instead. His Majesty is surprised on hearing that she had a gift prepared for him. Tia originally made it for her mother as a way to thank her for giving birth to her. She starts to hesitate and tells them that it usually comes in pairs for parents, but since she had no one to accept the other, she had dared to think of His Majesty when she was preparing it. She couldn't bear to face reality and was unable to give it to her mother. But if he were to accept it, she would be overjoyed. His Majesty questions her if she thought they would reject such a gift that is meant for her parents. He tells her to bring it to them. She brings the gift, and inside are long amber brooches for the both of them. They both put them on and are happy as it looks good on them. His Majesty notices how careful Tia is behaving and tells her she does not need to. She is Mirala's daughter, so she is like a daughter to them. Tia bows and is honored on hearing this. His Majesty and Tia's mother then decide to head off to the opera. They are very happy and were looking forward to seeing it. They slam the door shut and Tia starts to remember on how in the past, all she wanted to hear was that very sentence that she is his daughter. Now it is just fantasy. She knew that the fact that the Emperor felt momentarily indebted to her after today's event will be a huge advantage for her. Meanwhile, we see Cedric staring at the moon while thinking about the discussion that he had with Tia earlier. He starts to remember on how it's been around 20 years since his mother and father were wrongfully accused and executed for treason. Many have told him to take revenge by becoming the Emperor, but instead, he went the opposite direction and distanced himself from politics. The reason why he acted like this and became the Empire's shield was to protect the remaining people by his side, but he knew her reasons were not for survival nor revenge, but for the commoners' well-being. He starts to think about becoming the Emperor for the sake of the Empire's citizens. The sun is starting to rise, and one of Cedric's servants asks him if he wasn't able to sleep last night. He tells him that sleep wouldn't come to him. The servant questions him on why not taking a short nap. However, Cedric says there is no time for that. He plans to visit the palace today. He will meet with Tia and ask her once more. Cedric arrives to meet His Majesty. He is on his horse and is waiting outside the gate. Countess Eunice lets the Emperor know that he requests to see him. The Emperor allows to let him in. Lord Cedric enters. The Emperor tells him that he was just resting. He thanks His Majesty for seeing him, and if he had known that Countess Eunice was here, he wouldn't have bothered him. He starts to laugh and asks Cedric on why he is acting so stiff. Charlotte is his daughter, and he is his nephew, so that makes them both cousins. This makes them all one big family. As His Majesty is laughing, Lord Cedric is thinking in his head. He thought it was so strange hearing this from the man who accused his parents of treason and executed them. His Majesty continues saying that he hopes all of them get along together, which includes Tia as well, of course. Cedric flinches from hearing her name. He then confirms if he meant Lady Artesia, to which His Majesty says, correct. He had heard that he had a knight escort her home. Cedric tells him on how it was a trivial matter, but he understands that he was already aware of it. He continues by stating that he had coincidentally met her at the temple. She didn't have a single guard with her, so that is why he sent one of his. The Emperor starts to grin and asks him if there is any connection between him circling around the capital before finally coming to meet him and Tia. He turns around as he has no answer to this. The Emperor starts laughing even more and mentions that even the cautious Duke has this kind of side. He tells Cedric that he is sure Tia would like it if he visits her today. Cedric tells him that he did not come here to meet Tia, but to discuss about the Western Army. The Emperor cuts him off abruptly and starts yelling at him, telling him how he is impudent and that he does not know why he has chosen to meet him here instead of his study. Lord Cedric is stunned. The Emperor completely changes his mood and tells him how he shouldn't discuss business in places where family gathers. While smiling, he tells him on how they will discuss this in 4 days' time. He questions him on if he thought they would forget about the Western Army's contributions. As he pours him a cup of tea, Lord Cedric takes the tea from His Majesty and starts to think on how he's only received news that he had met Tia yesterday, but his attitude has definitely changed. Cedric heads to the Rosen estate. He asks the butler if Tia is home. The butler nervously tells him on how she has gone out. The maid whispers to the butler stating that she went to Count Indal's ball. The butler apologizes and then tells him on how he was just informed that Tia had gone to the Count Indal's ball. He requests for a few more time as he can ask her to return immediately. Lord Cedric asks him if he has a higher position than Tia in this house, to which he asks Lord Cedric to clarify. Lord Cedric tells him on how she is the heir to this estate. He tells the butler that he asked since he wasn't sure if he had the authority to tell Tia when she should come and go. The butler tells him he doesn't. The servant thought that since Master Lawrence would be returning soon, Cedric and Lawrence could chat while he escorted the miss. Cedric tells him that he was mistaken, to which the butler asks for clarity. He clarifies, stating that he thought the person he was talking to was the butler of the Rosen estate, but it seems like he is actually Lord Lawrence's butler. He starts to apologize. Lord Cedric starts to remember Tia's words and starts to realize on why she had asked him to protect her. Meanwhile, at the Count Indal's ball, Tia is just standing in the corner of a room while everyone is having lots of fun. One of the guests approaches Tia and asks her why she has such a sad look on her face. Tia realizes that the guest that asked her is Lady Ardea. Ardea tells her that she came early but hasn't even danced to a single song yet. Tia responds by stating that someone has to stay and decorate the walls. Ardea tells her that if she says it like that, she will be sad. All the men here lack manners and decency. However, she tells Tia that she is also at fault since she came in a dress that she has already worn 4 times while glaring and chuckling at her. She continues by questioning on how could the gentleman here tell if they've already danced with her or if it was actually at the last ball. Everyone that was listening to their conversation starts to laugh. Tia starts to smirk and tells Ardea that with her ugly appearance, wouldn't it just be a waste if she were to wear a dress that cost several hundred gold? She continues by talking about Lady Ardea's dress and how such a precious dress should only be worn by ladies as beautiful as her. This is so that justice is given to the designer's work. Ardea is flattered by her words and tells her that she has good taste. Tia asks her if it is all right, to which Lady Ardea asks her to clarify. She tells her that using such expensive material for an entire tailored dress would cost 10,000 gold. From what she has seen, this is the 4th time she has worn a dress made of this material. If so, then Count Ardea must be investing nearly half of his territory's annual income on her dresses alone. Ardea is shocked from this and asks her what she just said. She continues stating on how her parents must love her very much, so they haven't told her. Their main source of income is from their marble mining business. Right now, it isn't very profitable, so it will likely close in a year or 2. Currently, the profit margins have no doubt drastically decreased, which makes it on the brink of bankruptcy. Tia tells her that if it's just simply lavish spending, then it would be an excessive amount. But if it's an investment made for the family's future, then it may not be such a large sum after all. She smiles, stating that with her beauty, she can definitely fool her parents' expectations. Lady Ardea starts to shout and questions her if she is implying that her parents plan to sell her off. Suddenly, everyone starts to whisper to one another as Lord Cedric is entering. The guests start wondering on why he is here and who could he be meeting. The guests believe that he doesn't like women and wonder if anybody here is acquainted with his grace. Lady Ardea starts noticing how Lord Cedric is coming her way and greets him. He completely ignores her and passes by her. She is shocked upon seeing that he had stopped in front of Tia. He asks Tia if she is all right and brings his hand out. Tia hesitates, but eventually grabs his hand. Tia asks him on why he is here, to which Lord Cedric grabs her chin to raise her head and asks her on why her face is in such a state. She asks for clarity, to which he says that her cheeks are swollen and she has scratch marks that appear to have been caused by fingernails. The corner of her mouth is also torn. She nudges his hand, but Lord Cedric grabs her chin again and asks her if Countess Eunice did this to her. He then tells her on how he had met Countess Eunice at the palace today and how she told him to send her apologies to her. He then asks her if she was the one who did this to her, to which Tia tells him not to say anything more as she will be placed in a difficult situation. Lord Cedric then suggests to go back together, to which she agrees. As they are leaving, Lady Ardea stops them to introduce herself to Lord Cedric. She tells him on how it isn't proper for a gentleman to come to a ball and leave without dancing to a single song, especially when there are numerous young women without dance partners. Lord Cedric asks Ardea if she is friends with Tia, to which she smiles and says yes. He tells her on how it's also the duty of a gentleman to help a woman in an uncomfortable situation and asks her if she really is friend with Tia. If she is, then she should be more concerned about her friend, but it seems she prefers to stare at him instead. Lady Ardea has no reply to this and starts to turn pale. The guests also start to mutter all around them. Tia grabs his sleeve, which makes Lord Cedric turn towards her. He starts to examine Tia and notices on how she is beautiful, yet her face looks haggard. It's likely due to the lack of care given to her. Her clothes to this formal occasion are the same ones she wore yesterday to the temple, and her wrists are so skinny that he is able to see the bones. She doesn't look like the heir of a marquess. He was curious on how neglected could she be for her to look like this. Lord Cedric then raises his hand and asks Tia for a dance. Ardea is shocked from hearing this, and the guests start to mumble as they are surprised as well. Tia tells him that she doesn't want to draw so much attention, to which Lord Cedric tells her that she already has and that it's all right. The Grand Duke Evron makes for a lovely accessory. She places her hand on his and tells him that she might step on his feet as she is not well versed in dance. He tells her that if they step on another's feet, we should both be forgiving as he can't dance either. He then grabs her and they start to dance together. Everyone starts to stare at them and are amazed that they dance really well together. Tia starts to think that it's as if it's only the two of them in an empty ballroom. Last time it wasn't like this. Last time they danced, Lord Cedric asked her to dance in order to make a request. His request was for her to please look after Alicia. Tia questioned him on why he is asking her of this, to which he answered stating that he doesn't trust Lawrence. Tia asked him he had trusted her, to which he said that he knows that she had done everything possible to make Alicia marry Lawrence in order to secure his legitimacy. Whatever her motives were, it was ultimately Alicia's decision, so there's nothing else he can say. However, he sees her as a younger sister, so he is worried for her. He simply wishes to protect the Empire and Alicia for a long time. Suddenly, Tia sprains her ankle and starts to fall down. Lord Cedric grabs her before she can fall, and they continue to dance as if nothing happened. The guests start to clap and are amazed. They start talking amongst each other on how they look so good together, and if Lord Cedric was always this good at dancing. Lord Cedric starts to smile and tells Tia on how he is a better dancer than her. Tia replies back, telling him on how he is a renowned warrior and how it is cruel to compare each other's movements because of this. He starts to laugh upon hearing this, and Tia is just staring at him. They arrive back to Tia's estate, and Lord Cedric helps her off the carriage. Tia thanks him, but Cedric asks her for what? She replies saying it's because of dancing with her, to which Lord Cedric says that it was his duty as a gentleman. Tia tells him on how she knows that he wanted to help her preserve her dignity in front of Lady Ardea. Cedric says that it was nothing. Tia then requests for another favor, to which Cedric agrees. She asks him if he would go to Levgay with her. Lord Cedric questions her on why she wants to go to a slum that even men avoid. She tells him that there is someone she needs to meet there. They start heading to Levgay. Inside the carriage, Tia asks Lord Cedric if he has come to a decision about her offer. He questions her about if it's the offer for a 2-year contract marriage, where in exchange she'll make him the emperor. She replies with a yes, to which he says that before he gives his answer, He has a question for her. He asks her on why the marriage would only last for 2 years. Tia starts to think in her head that the reason is because he will fall in love with this Saintess Leisha, whose beauty rivals that of a rose in bloom. She doesn't want to be ridiculed as the person who had a divorce because her man had a new lover. Cedric starts to question her if she can't tell him. She replies by stating that she simply does not want to be Empress. She doesn't think she is suitable for the position. In fact, not having her as Empress would be for the greater good. He tells her that it seems like she is very determined to sacrifice herself for the Empire. He continues by stating that he has one condition. He does not want any harm to come to his people. If she wants to be with him, she must remember this. Tia tells him that she understands. Lord Cedric clarifies, stating that she doesn't sound like she does as it includes herself. She mustn't get hurt either. He doesn't want it to happen again. He would rather have her hitting them. They both start looking at each other in a serious way, and Tia starts to giggle. He starts to smile and tells her that what he meant is that he doesn't want her to get hurt. She smiles back and tells him that she agrees and thanks him for his concern. They finally arrive to Levga, and they start to get off the carriage. Lord Cedric offers her hand to her to assist her off the carriage, but instead grabs her with both hands. He then lowers her and tells her that a lady should exit a carriage without aid. Tia agrees with him as her heart is thumping. Suddenly, the citizens of Levga start asking for mercy from Tia and ask her to spare some change. They start to beg her and tell her that the more bread she gives to the hungry, the more favor God will bestow upon her when she ascends to heaven. One of Tia's maids gives her a hood to wear. She puts it on to disguise herself. Lord Cedric then asks her if she always prepares such clothing beforehand. It didn't seem like she had planned to come here. She replies by stating that her hair color tends to draw attention. After shooing away the citizens, Lord Cedric tells Tia that they should go, to which Tia agrees. Cedric asks her on who they are going to meet. She tells him the butler, to which Cedric asks for clarity. She tells him on how he served the Rosen estate for generations, but shortly after the late Marquess passed away, he was dismissed. She doesn't trust anyone. She believes that he likely holds a grudge against her mother and her, but his family has been loyal to them for generations. She wishes to put her faith on that loyalty and to visit him. Cedric understands and starts to think about how the butler served the wealthy and noble Rosen family his entire life. Yet he is staying at a place like this. They step inside his house and find him sweeping the floor. He asks them on what brings them here to a place like this. Tia asks if he can spare a moment with them. He sets his broom down and tells his employee that he will be back in a bit. He then brings them to a place where they can discuss, even though it's not a nice location. He then asks Lord Cedric on why he is here. He may have been kicked out, but the Hansen family served the Rosen Marquess for generations. There is nothing more for him to tell them. Lord Cedric tells him on how he is just simply Tia's guard. Tia removes her hood to reveal to him on who she is. He is shocked from seeing her. Tia greets him and introduces herself as Artesia Rosen. He starts to get angry and recognizes her as Mireille's daughter, Mireille, who caused the end of the Rosen family. He calms down and then tells her on how she bears a striking resemblance to Lord Michael, Lady Artesia Rosen's heir apparent. She tells him that he is the first person to address her as the heir apparent. He starts to tremble and asks her if her mother knows that she is here. She tells him that she doesn't, and if she knew, she probably wouldn't have let her come. Mr. Hansen asks her if she is aware of what her mother did while trembling. She tells him that she is aware. Her mother poisoned all the direct descendants of the Marquez Rosen family and framed the Hansen family. Her mother did this in order to make Tia the sole heir of the Marquess Rosen title. Lord Cedric is shocked upon hearing this. Mr. Hansen starts to remember on how he wanted to protest, but his daughter stopped him since they would die. However, he had proof of their innocence. His daughter told him that even if he can provide proof of Mireille's crime, they will surely die. There is no one to protect them. The Rosen Marquess's relatives are all blinded with greed from their share of inheritance. He asked his daughter if she wants her to close his eyes and pretend to be oblivious as the identity of the murderer is obvious. The daughter told him on how the inheritance belongs to the surviving descendant. She asked him if he thinks the miss would be grateful if he had revealed the truth. He would become her mother's enemy. He groans and asks her to gather everyone here. Once everyone is gathered, he tells them that from now, they must change their surname and forget that they worked for the Marquess Rosen family. That is the only way they can live. Although he instructed his family to do so, he was the only one who didn't change his name as he was still attached to it. He's already old and thought that if Mirella discovered him someday, he would have no choice but to die. Mr. Hansen then asks Tia on why she came looking for him. She bows and gives him an apology. He is taken aback from this. Tia tells him that this apology is not in the place of her mother, but as the last descendant of the Rosen family, this apology is because she couldn't protect her retainers. He starts to cry and Lord Cedric notices this. Meanwhile, back at the Rosen estate, Tia's mother is throwing a tantrum and breaking things. She asks the head butler to say something again. The head butler tells her on how Lord Cedric asked why he was loyal to Milady and not Tia while stuttering. She's shocked upon hearing this. She stands up and starts to question on who he is to spout such nonsense. The head butler continues stating on how he also said that since the rightful owner of the estate is Tia, he will inform her of what happened. Tia's mother questions him on why he just stood there and just listened. He replies, stating that if it's Lord Cedric, who was he to say anything? He could have slain him from where he had stood. She turns around and beckons for a glass of water. She sits down and starts to think about where Tia could have met Lord Cedric while drinking her water. She doesn't have any feminine traits and her meager looks are no hair near as hers. Suddenly, someone starts to knock on the door. The head butler opens the door and asks what happened. The other butler tells him on how a squire from Lord Cedric has arrived. He told them on how Lord Cedric went to Count Indale's estate. Afterwards, he boarded on to Tia's carriage. The squire has told them to wait until they have returned to the Rosen estate. Suddenly, Master Lawrence arrives. The head butler kneels down and asks Lawrence if his outing was to his satisfaction. Lawrence asks the head butler about what has happened since he mentioned that Lord Cedric's squire is outside. He starts to panic, but then Lawrence's mother welcomes him home. He starts to ask his mother about if something has happened with Lord Cedric. She replies, stating that nothing has happened and on how she can never have problems with him. She continues telling him that Lord Cedric came to find Tia this afternoon, which she found odd. Lawrence stays silent. His mother asks him if something angered him as he looks unwell. Lawrence asks his mother if she offended Cedric. Lawrence's mother tells him that she didn't even greet him. He left as soon as he heard that Tia went out. Lawrence tells her that he understands and to stay away and not interfere for when he comes back. He will deal with him. His mother questions him why. He replies stating that Lord Cedric is a man of integrity. Tia was useful for a change, but if someone like Mother interferes, things will go awry. His mother becomes stiff and asks him on what he means by someone like her. He clarifies stating on how Lord Cedric despises her and unfortunately despises him as well. For this very same reason, Father Emperor can't appoint Lawrence as the crown prince. Lawrence's mother is shocked from hearing this. We switch back to Tia and she is telling Mr. Hansen on how soon she will be married and will reclaim the Rosen estate from her mother. She tells him on how she will need his help for when that time comes. She wants to ensure that she gets back all of the Rosen estate's assets. She questions Mr. Hansen for if he had kept track of most of the assets and former employees. He hesitates but tells her that she is correct. Tia requests him to return to his rightful position and to help her. Mr. Hansen tells her on how his family name is still suspected for poisoning the Rosen family years ago. So how could he possibly return? Tia replies by stating on how she will become the next Marchioness Rosen. She will take care of any issue that may arise as there is always a way. He understands and decides to trust and follow Tia. Tia and Lord Cedric start to head home. Lord Cedric tells her on how he's amazed. Tia asks him why, to which he says that appealing to a person's heart is the best way to persuade someone. It seems that she is well aware of this at such a young age. She replies by stating that her intention was not to appeal to Mr. Hansen's heart. She was just giving him a valid excuse. Mr. Hansen is facing some financial distress. He also has a 14-year-old granddaughter to care for. He likely wanted to escape Levga for a while now. But without a suitable excuse, he wouldn't have taken her offer. Lord Cedric is silent but starts to smile. Tia asks him on why he's smiling. He tells her that it seems like she sees herself as a villainess. She turns and tells him that this is true. He continues telling her on how, if a person remembers a time of honor, they'll want to escape from dishonor, but only that person can decide when they'll escape. You aren't giving Mr. Hansen an excuse. You're giving him a chance to regain his honor. He is returning to the estate for you. Tia is surprised that he's returning for her. Lord Cedric continues by telling her that it's because he loves the Rosen estate, and she is the heir of Rosen. They are suddenly interrupted as they have arrived. Lord Cedric helps her out of the carriage by holding her hand. The lead butler welcomes Lord Cedric back. He then bows and asks Tia if she had an enjoyable outing. He then tells Lord Cedric on how Master Lawrence wanted to invite him for dinner. He replies by stating that they should save that for another time. He states that his answer may change if Tia were the one to invite him while smiling towards her. Tia tells him that, as an unmarried woman, she is reluctant to invite a man who isn't a relative into her home at this hour. He smiles and replies that he knew she would say that. He then excuses himself, and Tia tells him to be careful on his way back. He sits on his horse, and then Tia remembers something. She asks him if she can ask him something. He tells her to go ahead. She asks him on why has he been acting so formal with her. Last time they spoke, he was much more casual. He tells her that it's not necessary to respect Mirella's daughter, but it's only proper for him to be respectful towards his future wife. Tia starts to blush as Lord Cedric starts to slowly ride away. Tia's maid starts to call for her. Tia turns and asks her what's wrong. She tells her on how Master Lawrence would like to see her. She tells her that she understands. She heads into Lawrence's room, to which he welcomes her. She asks her brother if something is wrong as he was looking for her. He tells her on how he heard she went out with Lord Cedric. She replies by stating that she met him at Count Andel's estate and how they went on a stroll together. He asks her if she plans to meet him again. She stares and asks her brother if she can. Her brother tells her that there is no reason why she can't, as she is 18 now. He turns and tells her that next time she should invite him to their house. He hasn't gotten a chance to get acquainted yet since he rarely attends social events. They both get startled as they hear someone scream. They hear their mother slapping someone else, and the person is asking to be spared. Lawrence tells Tia that it's just a bout of hysteria. It happens quite often, and how she should not concern herself with that. It would become a problem if she got hurt and if Lord Cedric notices. Tia understands. Tia starts to head to where the noise was coming from. She starts to remember on how, before she would have tried to calm down her mother, but her mother wouldn't listen to her. She would instead start to beat up Tia since she would try to stop her. She would be beaten until she was black and blue. She turns around, to which Tia's maid asks her on if she will go inside. Tia responds asking her if she wants her to go inside and be beaten up. The maid tells her that's not what she meant. Tia tells the maid that she should intervene before it gets worse. She continues stating that she wouldn't be alone if they all share the beating. It wouldn't hurt as much. They'll compensate them generously and cover the medical expenses. Tia tells her to bring her over to her once it's over. It's the next day, and Tia's mother finds everything annoying. Tia knocks and enters into her mother's room. She gives her a drink, which is a lemon tea. Her mother tells her on how she is all grown up now, so she decided to ignore her outburst earlier. She replies by stating that Lawrence called for her, so they were discussing matters at the time. There is no way she would ignore her mother. Her mother starts to hug her and agrees with her. She tells her that when she's old, there's no one else she can rely on other than her daughter. She tells Tia that she is the reason on why she is still alive. Tia then tells her mother that if she isn't feeling well, How about inviting His Majesty to accompany her to the summer palace? The weather has been very hot recently. Maybe it's time to visit the summer palace as it's right in front of the sea. Tia's mother agrees, as it would be nice to escape the hot weather. She asks her if Lawrence would have the time. Tia responds while smiling, stating that if her brother is too busy, the two of them could still go on their own. That way, it would be more intimate. Her mother starts to think about it. Tia in her head starts to think about how the Emperor's ongoing stalemate with Lord Cedric regarding the Western Army became tiresome. Her mother's request to visit the summer palace for a vacation would provide him with the perfect excuse to postpone the matter. The Emperor and Tia's mother decide to leave for their summer vacation to the summer palace. This gave Tia the perfect chance to get some time to herself. A few days later, we see that a lot of items are being transferred inside Tia's house. The head butler starts to wonder on why all of these boxes are here. A lady walks in who greets the head butler. We find out that she is the owner of a famous boutique and is named Emily. The head butler questions her on why she is here, as they did not order any clothes. He also tells her on how Marchioness Rosen has gone to the summer palace with the Emperor and how she isn't here at the moment. Emily starts to laugh and tells him that's not it. She winks at him and tells him on how these clothes aren't for the Marchioness. They are actually for Lady Rosen. The head butler becomes startled by this and questions her if she is talking about Tia. She replies, stating that he is correct. Lord Cedric has sent her. He said that she could shop to her heart's content for her. The head butler starts to panic because he knew that if Tia's mother sees these piles of boxes when she returns, he will be reprimanded again. He then tells Emily that it is not the best time, but suddenly a knight shows up, which surprises the head butler. Emily and the knight start to greet Tia as she is coming down the stairs. Tia welcomes them. She asks them on why they are here, to which they reply, stating that Lord Cedric sent her and how he bought the entire catalog for her. She was flattered to hear this and tells her maid Sophie to escort Emily into the sitting room. As Tia is turning around, she notices the knight. He bows and introduces himself as Alphonse Lewin. He tells her on how he was ordered by Lord Cedric to escort Tia. Up until recently, he acted as Lord Cedric's sword, but now he is to be Tia's shield. Tia understands and then tells the head butler to prepare a room for him in the same corridor as her. She also tells him to prepare a room for the squires. The head butler is surprised from hearing this. He replies, stating that preparing rooms without either her mother's or her brother's permission isn't possible. Tia gives him a frigid look. He flinches and doesn't know what to say. Tia asks him if he needs to be reminded of who she is. He grabs her hand and replies by telling her to not act like this and to go inside and have a chat with him, as this is a private household matter. Tia slaps his hand away and the knight takes out his sword and grabs him by the head. She then tells the head butler that this is the second time that the Rosen estate was humiliated because of his actions in front of Lord Cedric. She continues by stating that if it was only once, it could be overlooked, as these things could happen if one was lazy, so it's possible to lose track of their master's whereabouts. But if it happens twice, it's a disgrace to the household. Sir Alphonse acts as Lord Cedric's eyes, yet he displayed such poor behavior in front of him. She then asks him who she is. The head butler starts to think in his head that normally Tia isn't so difficult. He then starts to yell at her. Tia's maid gets angry and slaps the head butler, asking if he is implying that her mother will beat Tia up. Tia looks at him and asks him again on who she is. He finally responds by stating that she is the heir apparent. Tia turns around and tells him that if he understands, he is to go and prepare accommodations for Sir Alphonse and the squires. Once he's done, he needs to bring the key and account books to her room. He questions her on what key. She clarifies by stating to bring her the vault key. He understands, and the maid starts to think in her head that he got what he deserved, as he used to harass the miss every day. Tia apologizes to the knight for him witnessing something unsightly as soon as he arrived, to which the knight replies that it is no big deal. He tells her on how Lord Cedric told him that Tia is in an extremely difficult position with her family. Even if Tia is to act peculiarly, he should not question her because, without a doubt, she would have a reason. She was surprised that Lord Cedric said that to him. Even Lawrence, whom she remained loyal to for the entirety of her past life, didn't trust her. She starts to think about how Lord Cedric has sent her a sign of his trust along with his soldier. Now she can finally proceed to the next step. Meanwhile, at the Odorov's jewelry store, Lord Cedric and Frail are trying to find a jewel that Lord Cedric intends to use in order to propose to Tia. She told him to find a Mr. White. Frail asks him if he is certain that he will marry Tia, to which he replies, stating that he has already agreed. Frail tells him on how she is not the best choice and, on top of that, for the desired proposal gift to be a jewel from some extinct family isn't worth it. Lord Cedric questions him if his judgment is that questionable. He tells him that's not it, to which Lord Cedric tells him that they should go. As Lord Cedric is riding his horse, he starts to remember on how Tia had asked him a favor, which was to propose to her by giving her the Olga's heart. He doesn't know why she chose this particular jewel, but he knew it must be for some reason, and he is placing his faith in her. He finally arrives to Mr. White's house, and he believes that they are in mourning. Frail understands that Lord Cedric feels bad. They need to do this now. They don't have the option to set aside another time to come back for the jewel. Lord Cedric agrees with him. Frail starts to knock on the door and asks if anyone is home. A lady opens the door and tells them on how they look like important people. She asks Frail on why they are here. Frail shows her a letter from Mr. Odorov, which states that Lord Cedric is looking for a jewel that Mr. White has. They walk in and sit down. Lord Cedric apologizes for intruding during a difficult time. She tells him that it's fine. However, in Mr. Odorov's letter, he mentioned that Lord Cedric is looking for a jewel. He confirms, stating that Mr. White has it. She tells him that her father may have passed away, but all of the ledgers from when he was a jewelry merchant remain. She tells him that she will help him to the best of her ability and asks him on what jewel he is looking for. He replies by telling her that he is looking for Saintess Olga's heart. She starts to tremble. Frail and Lord Cedric start to notice this. Frail tells her to calm down and takes the teacup from her. Lord Cedric then asks her on who she has sold it to as she is tearing up. She walks away and then comes back with a contract that transfers ownership of Saintess Olga's heart. Someone named Baron Yitz bought the jewel with a promissory note 7 years ago, but he continued to delay the payment to this day. Frail takes a look at the contract and notices that it stipulates that full payment must be made for ownership to be transferred. He tells her that if she sues him, she will be able to win the case. She starts to wipe away her tears and replies by stating that if they could sue, they would have already done so. However, the diamond was given to Marchioness Camellia, so they couldn't do anything. Frail turns to Lord Cedric and asks him if she is the sister-in-law of Grand Duke Roygar. Due to the large age gap, Grand Duchess Roygar obeys her sister, like one would to their mother. Moreover, the Marchioness is Grand Duke Roygar's staunchest supporter. The lady starts to cry even more and tells them on how her father had invested nearly all of his savings into Olga's heart. This incident brought him to the brink of bankruptcy. Afterward, he worked himself to the bone until his last breath. They are the ones that killed her father. Lord Cedric tells her that he will buy this contract. He throws a bag of money on the table and tells her that this should cover the amount due in the promissory note. He also tells her on how he has given a bit of extra compensation as well. The lady responds by telling him on how the contract is just a piece of paper now. The only reason on why they didn't burn it is because her father couldn't bear to discard his last shred of hope. Lord Cedric replies by stating that the contract might have been worthless for your father, but not for him. We then see Lord Cedric is home and Frail is pouring him a drink. Frail then starts to tell Lord Cedric that at first he thought Lady Rosen just wanted an expensive jewel for a proposal gift. He never imagined that Grand Duke Roygar would be involved in this. He continues by stating on how Grand Duke Roygar is Lord Cedric's maternal uncle. Since he's in the line of succession for the throne, he's one of the most powerful people in this empire, to which Lord Cedric agrees to. Frail starts asking Lord Cedric on what they should do. He'd believed that Tia just handed Lord Cedric the pretext to fight Marchioness Camellia. If they sue for the diamond's return, they could subvert the Camellia family's reputation. An innocent merchant had a jewel seized from him, which eventually drove him close to bankruptcy, then death. As a result, his children were left as orphans. This would be a huge scandal, especially if it emerged while Lord Cedric was searching for a proposal gift. Lord Cedric sighs and then tells Frail on how he has no intention of exposing the White family to the public just to besmirch Marchioness Camellia's reputation. There's no sense in fighting a battle that will drag Miss White's character through the mud. He tells him on how it's like a riddle, to which Frail asks for clarification. He states on how it's like an old folktale. In the East, a beautiful princess gave out 3 riddles for her suitors to solve if they wished for her hand in marriage. Frail knew this riddle and mentioned on how, after hundreds tried and failed, a wandering young man came and solved the riddles. He ended up marrying the princess, to which Lord Cedric said that he is correct. Lord Cedric raises his head and prays that this is his only riddle. They start to review the facts, to which one of Lord Cedric's soldiers tells them on how Baron Yitz is a casino owner. Along with several others, he owns the large casino located in the Fontaine family's territory. Frail asks the soldier named Daniel on how he knows this jokingly, as he believes he has been gambling, to which Daniel tells him of course not. His younger brother incurred some debt with the Yitz casino, and he just helped pay off the debt a couple of times, so he's familiar with them. Lord Cedric starts to think and believes he knows where the issue might be. He believes that he is probably one of his uncle's sources of income. Frail then asks Lord Cedric on what he will do, to which he replies by questioning him on what he thinks he should do. Frail starts to grin and knows that since a merchant was taken advantage of and subsequently died because of a noble who owned a casino, it's something that Lord Cedric can't ignore. Lord Cedric wears his coat and decides to head to the casino, as it should be in full swing by now. Frail tells him on how he will prepare a group of knights. The 3 of them then start to march to the casino. At the Fontaine Casino, we see that everyone is laughing, having fun, and profits are looking good for them. Suddenly, one of the employees dashes to Baron Yitz to let him know that something has happened. Baron Yitz tells him not to cause a scene in the main hall, or the gullible people won't be able to focus on their games. He replies by stating that it's an emergency. He tells him on how Lord Cedric is here. He is shocked from hearing this, as he finds out that he has the certification of ownership for Saintess Olga's heart in his possession. Lord Cedric opens the door wide open, which makes a banging sound. Baron Yitz greets him and asks him on why he's at this humble place. Lord Cedric then shows him the contract and asks him if he knows what it is, to which he says that he's not sure and questions him on what it is. Frail gives him a glare, which makes him remember on how it is the ownership of Saintess Olga's heart, the one he bought 7 years ago. Lord Cedric tells him on how he has acquired the ownership of the jewel. He tells him on how there should be no issues since he hasn't made a single payment within the 7 years. He continues by stating that he must check the area for the diamond and his ledgers. Baron Yitz is shocked from hearing this. Lord Cedric tells his knights to search the area. Baron starts to shout at him, stating that he doesn't have the authority to do this at his place of business. Lord Cedric replies by stating that if he has an issue, he should bring the diamond right now. Baron Yitz tells him on how he has a diamond that's even better, that he could perhaps give instead. Lord Cedric replies stating that he wants Olga's heart, as it's the one he wants to give to his lady, as she specifically asked for it. It wouldn't be right to give her something else. One of his knights then tells Lord Cedric on how he should come with her to see something. She tells him on how there is a dungeon in the basement. They head to the basement, and Lord Cedric is shocked. He realizes that human trafficking is occurring secretly within this casino. Frail questioned what these bastards have been doing. Lord Cedric couldn't believe that someone could do this as they were very young children. Back at Camelia's house, Tia is having some tea with Marchioness Camelia. She is mentioning to her on how she read somewhere that the things a crown prince experiences will have a lasting influence on his reign as an emperor, to which Camelia is surprised to hear. Tia continues by stating how gambling, drugs, bribery, and even violence are acceptable. The public would simply view those things as typical characteristics of nobility. But if one were to harm a young child, the public would be outraged. In order to placate them, His Majesty would have to feign anger as well. Camelia feels as though she is being threatened. Tia puts her teacup down and responds by telling her that she is simply just letting her know that it would be of her best interest to withdraw for Grand Duke Roiger's sake. Camelia responds by stating that she has no idea what she is talking about. She questions Tia on what kind of relationship she thinks Grand Duke Roigar and Baron Yetz have. Tia responds by stating that Baron Yetz is a crude man, so he has likely bribed an influential figure in hopes of gaining protection for times like these. Tia starts to smile and tells her that a lady of her standing couldn't possibly suspect that the jewel the Baron presented to her was forcibly taken from a civilian. Camelia in her head starts to think on how Tia is very clever. It's a pity that they didn't meet sooner. Camelia tells Tia to wait a moment and then brings a box back to her. The box contains the Olga's heart necklace, and she requests Tia to accept it. She tells Tia that back when she was not acknowledged as Marquess Ludin's daughter or even considered a lady, she was the most honorable empress from afar. At the time, she heard tales of the family jewel that Her Majesty's friend and attendant Countess Fescher possessed. Her Majesty treated her friend of lowly status well and even praised her family's jewel. She was so envious that she cannot forget that moment. She couldn't stand seeing that vulgar man, who is not even a legitimate noble, with such a precious object. The necklace is merely a temporary setting, because the statue of Saintess Olga is gone. Tia understands, and she is impressed by Marchioness Camelia's excuse. If she truly respected the Empress, she would have already presented this to her. In reality, this jewel is a trophy of sorts for the Marchioness. It symbolizes her attainment of status. Tia decides to leave, and Camelia takes her to the door. Camelia smiles, hoping that Tia will properly communicate her feelings to Her Majesty, to which Tia replies, stating that she will keep them in mind. As she is stepping on her carriage, Camelia tells her on how she believes they would make excellent friends and to drop by once in a while. Tia smiles and starts heading back home on her carriage. Afterwards, Tia sent out missives to begin the process of reinstating the Hanson family into the Rosen estate. She had finally finished the preparations to claim the estate for herself. The next morning at the Rosen estate, Lord Cedric comes to visit Tia. The maid bows to him and welcomes him. She tells him on how Tia has instructed her to bring him to the Twilight Room. Lord Cedric starts to think about how the Twilight Room is meant for lovers or people who intend to seduce one another. He then realizes that it makes sense since he is her suitor right now. As Lord Cedric is approaching Tia's room, Tia is getting ready for him with the help of Emily. One of the maids tells them on how Lord Cedric has arrived. Emily and the maids bow and tell him on how it's an honor for them to meet him. However, Lord Cedric is only focusing on Tia, as she looks so beautiful. Emily notices this and makes Lord Cedric turn. Tia tells her on how this is enough. Lord Cedric apologizes for his intrusion so early in the morning, to which Tia tells him that she had breakfast 2 hours ago. It can hardly be considered early in the morning now. Emily tells Tia on how she will take her leave now that Tia is ready. She also takes everyone else in the room along with her. Now it is only Lord Cedric and Tia in the room. It's awkward for them. Tia smiles and tells him to sit, and she will prepare tea for the both of them. They sit down and start to sip their tea. Lord Cedric feels more awake now, as he wasn't able to sleep much last night. Tia tells him on how meeting Emily has exhausted him more than the lack of sleep he had. Lord Cedric clears his throat and tells her on how he isn't used to it. Many things happened last night, so he wants to apologize and confirm some things with her. Tia tells him to go ahead. He tells her on how he had promised that he would bring the Saintess Olga's heart, but he is afraid it will be difficult to fulfill that promise. He doesn't think he will be able to propose to Tia with it. Tia tells him on how she is the one who should beg for his forgiveness. She clarifies to Lord Cedric by stating on how she paid Marchioness Camellia a visit to retrieve the necklace while he was taking care of business yesterday. She then apologizes for deceiving him. He sighs and knew that Tia had known about this from the beginning. He was disturbed by yesterday's events. He wondered if he should feign ignorance about those atrocities and bargain for the jewel, or if he should deal with the situation, even if it costed him the jewel. He questions her if she had anticipated that he would not find the jewel. Tia questions him back, asking him if he knows why she likes him. Lord Cedric freezes on the spot from hearing this. Tia tells him on how he was born a noble, so he had every reason to live in his own bubble. Instead, he always considered the commoners in his heart. After hearing this, Lord Cedric realized on what she meant and questioned himself on what he was expecting. He places his cup down and then tells Tia on how he plans to go visit Chancellor Lynn later. Tia smiles and tells him on how Chancellor Lynn is a just and admirable person. She continues by stating that since Lord Cedric is part of the military and remains separate from politics, he doesn't need to give up this image just yet. It should be enough if he just checks on how things are progressing every once in a while. Lord Cedric then questions her on what she plans to do with Saintess Olga's heart. She replies by stating that she will present it to the Empress. Since it is a keepsake of her decreased friend, it's only right for her to have custody of it. Lord Cedric tells her that he understands as he raises his cup for another sip. She then asks him if he is disappointed, to which he replies, stating that he suspected she would do this as he heard about Viscountess Fescher. There is nothing for him to be disappointed about. But now that the gift is gone, an extravagant proposal will be difficult. He then raises his hand and asks for Tia for her hand. He gives her another proposal gift instead, which seems to be a bracelet. It caught his eye while he was at the jewelry shop searching for Olga's heart. He wanted to give this to her. Lord Cedric then kneels down on one knee and asks Tia for her hand in marriage. Tia's heart starts to flutter as he asks this. Meanwhile, in front of the Office of Public Security, the citizens are demanding that the criminals are to be arrested and publicly executed. They are discussing amongst themselves about how the children were abducted and imprisoned only to be slaughtered on hunting grounds for pleasure. They also mention on how apparently they would be abducted and sent to Count Izon. At the Mandrami Palace, His Majesty is shouting at Lawrence about how he could associate himself with scum like Count Izon. Now Lawrence will be implicated in this incident. Lawrence replies by telling him how they aren't close acquaintances and how he had introduced him to the previous Count Izon. The Emperor yells back at him, asking him if he is unable to judge a man's character on his own. He continues by stating that of all the things, it had to be human trafficking. Young children were killed. He then asks him if he knows what Cedric said. The Emperor continues by saying that Cedric said that he could handle the corruption case. However, he sees fit as long as the Emperor lets him put a decisive end to human trafficking. A straight-laced man like Cedric is willing to overlook such a massive corruption scandal. This just shows how serious this human trafficking case is. Suddenly, Lawrence's mother walks into the room. She starts to calm down the Emperor and tells him not to get so angry. The Emperor tells her on how she came running in the first sign of her son being in trouble. She tells him that the doctor just said that he shouldn't get too agitated as it's bad for his heart. She tells him not to stay angry. He sighs and tells her not to cuddle him too much. This is the reason why he's incapable of accomplishing anything by himself. When he was his age, he had already attained the position of crown prince through his hard work. Lawrence's mother whispers into his ear, stating that it's simply because His Majesty is so exceptional. He then tells Lawrence to quickly cut ties with Izon and he will handle the rest. He tells him on how he should consider himself lucky. Cedric is headstrong, but he has a soft spot for his relatives. For Tia's sake, he will not condemn you. He then tells him to leave and find a way to get closer to Cedric when he returns to the capital. He continues by telling him to use his head. He may be his father, but he has no intention of naming him the crown prince without just cause. He does not have the power to do so, to which Lawrence replies by stating that he understands. The next day, at the Rosen estate, they are preparing for a tea party. Tia is getting ready with the help of her maid. The maid rolls up the sleeves of Tia's dress. Once they are rolled up, she starts to blush as she notices the bracelet that Lord Cedric gave her. The maid starts to giggle and tells her on how slightly shortened sleeves is the trend these days. Suddenly, two ladies named Hazel, whose parents own an influential newspaper, and Miel, who is Sir Kishore's daughter, greets Tia. She greets them back by telling them on how it's a pleasure for her to meet them. The two ladies notice the bracelet that Lord Cedric had gift her and mention on how it's so pretty. Hazel tells Tia that nowadays there isn't a single person who hasn't heard of this diamond bracelet. Miel smiles and agrees, stating that numerous papers stated that it was a token of Lord Cedric's love. Suddenly, one of the maids is calling out to Tia and is dashing towards her. Tia asks her on why she is causing such a commotion as she has guests over. The maid then tells Tia on how her mother has finally returned. We then see that Tia's mother has arrived and asks the maids on why there are carriages here. The maids bow and tell her on how Tia is hosting a tea party, which shocks Tia's mother. As she is walking towards the house, she thinks that this is crazy and how Tia has become quite bold while she was away. She starts to shout inside the house and states that she was going to be nice to her because she helped Lawrence. But now she has angered her yet again. Tia's mother finally finds Tia and is very angry. Tia apologizes to her friends and tells them on how she must take her leave. She then approaches her mother and welcomes her back home. Her mother starts to scream at her and calls her crazy. She then grabs her by the hair, and her friends start to panic. She then raises her hand and tells her that she told her that an ugly and stupid child like her should just obediently stay indoors and do housework or embroidery. She then slaps Tia across the face. Miel starts to faint and Hazel tells Tia's mother to stop. Miel drops to the ground and Hazel starts to ask her if she is all right and asks everyone to call a doctor for help. Tia's mother grabs Tia's hand and takes her inside the house. Inside the house, Tia's mother starts to beat her up and the maid is trying to stop her. She starts to yell at Tia and tells her on how even if she receives clothing or jewels, a man's interest is still fleeting. She calls her stupid and tells her that at the end of the day, she can only rely on those of your own blood. Suddenly, the door opens and makes a loud banging noise. We see one of the maids guiding someone to Tia. Tia's mother is still beating her up and yelling at her, stating that she's the one who gave birth to her and made her the daughter of a marquess. She then grabs a flower vase and throws it at Tia. Someone catches the flower vase before it hits Tia. The person who catches it turns out to be Lord Cedric. He asks Tia if she is all right. Tia is surprised to see him here. Tia's mother starts to yell even more and asks him on how dare he enters someone's home without permission. She tells him to get out this instant. Lord Cedric drapes her with his coat and tells her to stop. She replies by stating that she is simply a mother teaching her daughter. She questions Lord Cedric on who he is to interfere in their business. He responds by asking her on how this is teaching someone. She responds by telling him that she will decide what she can do to her daughter. Lord Cedric grabs her by the hand and starts to squeeze it. He tells her to stand down and she starts to scream in pain. As Tia is gasping for air, she tells Lord Cedric not to hurt her, as it will be a problem for him if her mother gets hurt. The Emperor will be angry. Lord Cedric then lifts Tia up and starts to carry her. He then tells her to stay still. Tia's mother tells him to put her down as she's her daughter. Lord Cedric ignores her, which makes Tia's mother even more angry. She tells him again to put her down. He responds by stating that she isn't her daughter anymore. She responds by telling him on how she's her daughter. She will decide whether she lives or dies. Lord Cedric just ignores her. His knights Frail and Daniel then start to approach Lord Cedric. He tells them on how Tia will move into their residence as of today. He tells them to seize the mansion. confiscate even the smallest things so Tia can decide what to do with them. Frail understands and agrees with him. Tia then tells Lord Cedric on how Alice and her guests are here. She mentions on how Miel's body is weak. Lord Cedric responds by stating that Frail will take care of it. He tells her to worry about herself. We then see that Tia is at Lord Cedric's house by a fireplace. She is in bed and relaxing. Lord Cedric enters the room and hesitates a little when Tia calls out to him. He tells her on how he didn't know she was awake. Tia tells him to come in. She tells him on how she hopes he does not mind her unsightly appearance, to which Lord Cedric says that he never had that kind of thought. He was worried, so he decided to stop by before leaving. Tia thanks him for his concern yesterday and for coming to help her. He tells her that it was the obvious thing to do. She then tells him on how she didn't think he would personally come. Lord Cedric then asks Tia if this was one of her strategies after hearing that she didn't think he would personally come. Cedric asks her if this was one of her strategies. He found yesterday's incident to be quite strange since he ordered Alphonse to stay by her side. The order was meant to announce to everyone for his desire to be with her and to always protect her. Alphonse knew all about that, but somehow Alphonse was absent on the day that Tia had decided to host guests. On that same day, Tia's mother also returned. Tia replies by stating that she isn't omnipotent. Cedric tells her on how this is not an answer. He asks her again if this is one of her strategies, to which she replies stating that it is. She continues by stating that she wouldn't go as far as to say that it was totally arranged. She just happened to invite some guests over on the same day of her mother's return. She wanted a decisive act that would show that she severed ties with the Rosen family. Without a catalyst, she couldn't secure the Rosen estate in one blow. She may have confiscated the key and account books from Bill, but that is only a portion. Cedric interrupts her and yells at her. He then asks her if she is telling him that it was necessary for her to be beaten. She replies stating that it was, which surprises Cedric. Cedric covers his eyes and tells Tia on how, since yesterday, he has been trying to justify her actions to avoid getting angry with her. But she's making it impossible for him. Tia responds by asking him on why he is angry. She apologized for not giving him any forewarning, but a very important issue was at stake here. He stares at her and tells her that it's because she was injured. Tia starts to blush after hearing this. She then replies stating that she wasn't injured too badly. It may have seemed dangerous at the time, but her mother had no intention of killing her. Cedric responds by telling her not to do that to herself and not to make herself a tool. Once she starts to consider this as an option, it will go down a slippery slope. He tells her on how one day she may even sacrifice her life if she keeps thinking this way. Tia starts to remember on how she has already gone through a fate worse than death. She is not afraid to lay down her life. Cedric continues stating that he has said this before. If she wishes to be allies, then she must not get hurt. Tia apologizes to him. He responds telling her that she also made another mistake, to which Tia asks for clarification. He clarifies by telling her not to act like she is an inconvenience to him. She responds stating that she does not think that. She feels grateful. She never considered that he would come in person yesterday. Cedric asks her if she thought that he would send one of his knights. He only did what he naturally should have done. She may think of this engagement as one of convenience. She might not even consider him as a real fiancé. He holds her hand and tells her that he wants to be at least considered as her partner. She replies stating that she has already vowed to serve him, so why would he say such things? He responds by asking her on why she won't accept his protection then. Her role may be to strategize for him, but his role is to protect her. He sighs and then asks her on what does she have to say to that. Tia starts to think in her head on what she should say. Tia starts to squeeze her hand. She then whispers that when he came to save her, she was really happy. Two ladies start talking about how Tia's mother mistreats Tia terribly. The other lady also heard that Tia's mother was preventing Tia to marry in order to keep her from her inheritance. The lady citizen agrees with her. She tells her on how people have been saying that Tia's mother beat her daughter up in front of their guests. The other lady citizen felt bad for Tia. They then start talking about how it's such a relief that Tia has gotten engaged to Lord Cedric. They believe that Lord Cedric is an incredible person. He's honorable, kind, and knows how to cherish a woman. Not only is he manly, he's also family-oriented. We then go back to Cedric and Tia, where Cedric is telling her to eat more and hands her some food. Cedric then tells Tia on how Ansgar and Marcus are worried sick because she never finishes her food. He tells her on how he's been ordered to feed her a snack today as well. He asks her if she does not like the food. She responds by telling him that's not it. He then asks her on how much she is able to eat, to which she responds, stating that she can eat about half. He then grabs the plate and starts to eat half of the food. He places it down and tells her that she can reassure the chef by finishing the rest. She starts to giggle since he ate it all at once. He tells her on how it's just a snack. He then asks her about where Lawrence is and what he's doing. She takes a sip of her tea and tells Cedric that he returned to the Rosen estate today. Cedric asks her if she was tracking his whereabouts and if she let him in. Tia responds by stating that he lives there. She can't prevent him from entering. Besides, her mother resides there as well, and she plans to keep it that way. Cedric tells Tia that he doesn't think she needs to do that. Lawrence owns plenty of assets as well. She smiles back at Cedric and tells him on how things need to stay as they are right now. Cedric sighs and then tells her not to push herself, to which Tia agrees to. Suddenly, they hear a knock on the door, and Tia's maid calls for her. The maid tells Tia on how she has a guest waiting outside in the sitting room. Tia asks her on who it is. She responds stating it's Lawrence. Tia starts to walk to the sitting room to meet her brother Lawrence. The maids start to whisper to one another as she walks past them. She removed the makeup that concealed her bruises because it wouldn't do if Lawrence didn't see the full extent of her injuries. She enters the room and notices that Lawrence is sitting on a chair with his eyes closed. She bows and asks her brother about him being here. He opens his eyes and tells Tia to sit down. She sits down and then tells him on how she has heard that he chose not to stay at the Summer Palace. He responds by telling her that he needed some space. Tia then asks him if he has heard of the news and if he has been to the estate. He replies, stating that he has, and he noticed on how her belongings had been organized. She tells him that even though the wedding has yet to take place, Lord Cedric insisted that staying with him would be the best. Tia asks about how Mother is. Lawrence tells her on how she is the same as usual. She switches between fits of hysteria and rest. He continues by telling her to go visit her if she is concerned. Tia refuses this offer and tells her brother that it will take her some time before she wishes to see her mother again. In fact, this situation has presented her with the perfect opportunity. She is thinking of using this opportunity to sever her ties with her mother. Lawrence is surprised from hearing this and asks her if she means that. She replies, stating that she does. She starts remembering on how in the past, when she had one of her episodes, she would physically abuse Tia. Once her anger was exhausted, she would treat her tenderly. Even though Tia knew this was a never-ending cycle, she couldn't abandon her mother. But now, things need to change for her. Lawrence tells Tia not to decide such a decision so hastily. He questions his sister if she loves her mother. Tia starts to squeeze her hand and replies, stating that she loves her mother. She then raises her head and tells him that regardless of the truth, she does not wish to devote her entire life to her. She wishes to find happiness with Lord Cedric. This might be her only chance to seize her own happiness in this lifetime. So she will do her best. She may not become a Grand Duchess that inspires veneration, but she would at least like to be properly acknowledged as Lord Cedric's wife. She continues stating that if she is forever known as Mirella's daughter, then that will never happen. No matter what she'll do, she'll be condemned. She then asks her brother if he understands what she is saying. She doesn't want Lord Cedric to see such a wretched appearance again. Lawrence understands Tia and tells her to do as she wishes. He then asks her on what will happen to the Rosen estate. He knows that he has a few estates of his own, but it will take him some time to organize everything before he can move out. Tia responds, stating that she will leave the Rosen estate to her mother. She will also give her annuities that will more than cover the cost of maintenance, as well as her daily expenditures. She can continue to live there as she has been. Lawrence understands the situation and congratulates Tia on her engagement. even though it's sooner than he had expected. He wished that she had informed him ahead of time. Tia asks her brother on what he will do next. She asks him on how long he plans to keep his ties with Mother. Lawrence asks for more clarification as he doesn't understand what Tia means. She clarifies, stating that no one may ever say this to his face, but as Mother's daughter and as well as his sister, she will tell him this. She believes that her brother needs to sever ties with Mother the most. Lawrence asks what she means. She tells him on how Mother is indeed favored by the Emperor, but favor isn't what he needs. Even if he was to sever ties with Mother, he's still His Majesty's son. Lawrence tells her to continue. She continues stating that he doesn't need His Majesty's favor to become the Crown Prince. What he really needs is legitimacy. There's only one person who can grant that to him. He asks her on who that person is. She tells him that it's someone who is the only one with the power to adopt an illegitimate child as her own and declare them the heir. That person is the Empress. Lawrence is silent from hearing this. Tia asks him if His Majesty has told him. She thought he would have since he became Emperor through the same means. Tia continues by telling her brother that it might be because Mother is fixated upon him, so maybe she's preventing His Majesty from telling him. Tia starts to feel anxious. Since the Emperor favors her brother, everyone considers him as the future Crown Prince. But if disaster were to strike, Grand Duke Rhaegar could just as easily be the one to ascend to the throne. Lawrence responds by telling Tia not to carelessly make such ominous remarks. She could be accused of treason for those words. Tia agrees and apologizes to her brother. Lawrence doesn't understand why Tia is so uneasy. She replies by telling him that she is her sister, so she worries about him. Her brother's well-being is directly related to hers. Lawrence starts to think to himself and agrees that Tia's words have some merit. Tia starts to think in her head that the trap has been set. Lawrence gets up and tells Tia not to worry so much as His Majesty is still healthy. Tia agrees to this and apologizes for uttering such tactless and ominous words. He tells Tia that she does not need to see him off. She tells him to be careful on his way home. He shuts the door behind him, and Tia starts to think that with no legitimate crown prince, the Emperor would favor Lawrence for only one reason. The Emperor loves her mother dearly and has decided to build a family with her. But if fractures were to form within that happy little family, then his favor would disappear and various factions would try to take advantage of the resulting void. She decides to create that fracture as the first goal. Someone starts to knock on the door. Tia tells them to come in. The butler walks in and tells Tia that the letter she's been waiting for has arrived. The butler was worried that Lord Lawrence would see it, so he brought it personally to Tia. She notices that the letter is an invitation from the Empress. She was happy that she finally received the letter that she has been waiting for. Lawrence is heading home in his carriage. It is raining very heavily outside. He starts to remember on what the Emperor told him, which was to get Cedric on his side and he will handle the rest. He makes it back to the Rosen estate and gets out of his carriage. His mom notices that he has returned and runs to him. She is restless and asks him on what Tia said and if she is coming back. Lawrence asks her if she thinks she'd want to come back after she beat Tia in front of her guests. She replies by stating that this is her home. She has to return. He tells her that there's no way Cedric would let that happen. She starts to shout, stating that this is ridiculous. He shouldn't be the one to decide that. She is her daughter, and she's still so young. She hasn't even permitted her to marry him. Lawrence questions her mother about if she wants to ruin his future. She flinches and asks him on what he means. He replies, stating that the Emperor favors this marriage and questions her on why she is so strongly against this marriage. She hesitates and then tells Lawrence that it's not that. She just couldn't believe that Tia did this to her. She tells him that she wouldn't have hit her on purpose. She continues by stating that she had to sacrifice a lot in order to give birth and raise her. Lawrence understands and states on how he knows that she went through a lot in order to give birth and raise her. He then asks her if this is the second time to which she asks for clarification on what he means. He tells her on how it's the second time that she is standing in his way. First, when she gave birth to Tia, and now this. He asks his mother if she wants him to die. His mother starts to tear up and asks him on what is he saying and why would she ever want that. He replies stating that everyone who pursues the throne, but ultimately fails, will perish. He tells his mother not to do anything unnecessary. Lawrence continues stating that she doesn't have the power to depose of the empress or to make him the crown prince, so she should stay put. She then starts to tell him something about the empress, but then turns and tells him that it's nothing. Lawrence turns around and starts to walk away from her. She grabs his hand and starts to yell about how she will never disappoint him. She promises him that she won't do it again and how she won't ever disappoint him again. He yanks his hand away from his mother and starts to walk away. His mother starts to shout and call out to him. She then collapses on the ground and starts to cry. She doesn't know what to do. The next day at Lord Cedric's house, everyone is preparing for an event. Cedric tells Tia that she can do whatever she wishes. She can use the estate's budget however she would like as well. He tells her to feel free to buy things for her own comfort in addition to the things she needs for work. Tia thanks him for this kind gesture. He replies by asking her what she means as this will all soon be hers as well. She starts to blush and agrees with him. He clears his throat and tells Tia that he has something to take care of, so he will take his leave. He then walks out of the room. The door closes and we are introduced to the headmaid named Ro. Tia tells her to sit with her, which she does. Tia offers her money and tells her to add this money to the budget for making lace and replacing the curtains and beddings. The maid tells her that this is too much. Even half of this would be plenty. She responds by telling her that she is deliberately giving her more than enough. Tia tells her on how it would take too long to ask the butler for money when she's busy with her own workload. Tia smiles and tells her that if it's necessary, she can use it to hire contractors. To keep things fair, she can divide the leftovers between the other workers. Ro tells her on how it's still too much. She still hasn't used all the money she gave them to buy new clothes for the maids last time. Tia suggests to her to use the money to hire more people or to buy a couple of tea sets. She tells her on how she made a withdrawal because she cares about them. She doesn't intend to deposit it again. The maid starts to ponder, but then eventually accepts the money from Tia. The maid thanks her as Tia passes her the money. Tia tells her that since she is young and inexperienced in running a grand duchy, she will need to rely on her assistance. Ro bows and tells Tia that she will keep that in mind. She then takes her leave. Tia tells her to keep up the good work. Tia's maid asks Tia if it's really necessary to test her again, to which Tia questions her on why she thinks it was a test. The maid tells her that she gave her excess power to see what she would do with it. Last time, she said it would be fine as long as she didn't take more than 1/10 of the money. Tia responds by telling her that Ro ended up not taking a single penny for herself, so there is no need to investigate further. She wants to find out what her motives are. The maid replies to Tia stating that she could simply be an honest person. Tia tells her that this would be all the better since she would be able to trust her. She would rather test her now and replace her if she makes a mistake than place her trust in her only to be betrayed by her later on. Tia's maid starts to whine that she spent so much effort to reclaim the Rosen fortune. It's such a shame to spend it. Tia responds by telling her not to worry as money is just a tool. Plus, it's just pocket money for her. Tia's maid starts to giggle from hearing this and believes that Tia is amazing. They suddenly hear a knock on the door and someone enters the room. Tia smiles and welcomes him inside. We find out that Frail was the one who entered the room and greets Tia. Tia remembers him and tells him that it's been a while. She mentions to him on how this is their first encounter since meeting at the Rosen estate. Frail states that she remembered even despite the chaos. Tia sits down and tells him that, of course she does, as she met him at the temple as well. He helped them when the wheel of her carriage had fallen out. Frail remembers that moment as well. He then tells her on how he heard that she personally appointed him as her escort for today's outing. She agrees with him. Frail tells her that he is not proud of it, but he isn't as skilled as the other knights in the Everon Grand Duchy. Not to mention, He can't even compare to Alphonse. Tia replies by telling him that she didn't request his presence to be protected from danger. It's just that Alphonse is a bit unsuited to accompany her for this. She thought that Frail would want to know what kind of person she is, which is why Tia thinks that he immediately agreed to her request because of this. Frail was a little surprised to hear this. He tells her that since she was chosen by Cedric and is the lady of this house, he wouldn't dare to make judgments. He knows as much about her as Lord Cedric does. Tia smiles and asks him to draw his conclusions after today's task is complete. They get on the carriage and start to head somewhere. Inside the carriage, Frail asks her if she goes on these outings often. She responds stating not until now. But this will become routine whenever she has to go out unnoticed. Frail starts to think to himself and stays silent from hearing that response. They finally arrive to a liquor store and walk in. Tia tells the bartender to tell Ray Fidget that she's here to buy 1 bottle of Columbine liquor. The bartender asks her on where she heard that from, to which Tia tells him that she heard it from Ray. She continues by stating that her and Ray are well acquainted. Ray comes down and asks Tia on who she is and how does she know his name. She tells him that this isn't important. Tia continues by telling him that she is here to buy a bottle of Columbine liquor. She knows he'll sell anything when it comes down to money. He turns around and tells her that he will connect her with someone who's willing to sell. Tia responds by telling him no. She wants him to make the arrangements himself. Of course, she doesn't expect him to dirty his own hands. Rhys starts to think to himself on how Columbine liquor is slang for assassination. He starts to have a bad feeling about this and thinks about refusing her request. Tia then tosses a bag of coins on the ground. She asks him if this will suffice. He tells her that he will introduce her to someone who's selling. She then tosses another bag of coins on the ground and tells him that she will double the amount. He gets agitated and turns around to tell her to leave. Tia tosses even more money on the ground for him. He starts to stare at the gold as he can't resist. Tia tells him on how it's 60 gold and asks him if this is still not enough to sell his humanity. He tells her to stop this. Tia then takes out a paper and gives it to him. He takes it and asks her on what it is. He starts to read the letter and we find out that someone is taking care of his younger siblings. He starts to tremble while reading the letter. He then tells Tia on how he had never sent her any money or a doctor. He realizes that she must have sent them to her. He then starts to dash and shouts to Tia about if she intends to use his younger siblings to threaten him. Frail shouts back and tells him to stop while taking out his sword. Tia stops Frail from taking it out. Rhys starts to get ready to swing at Tia and tells her on how he won't tolerate this. He stops himself from punching her. He tells her that he wants to hit her, but since she is a noble, he is restraining himself and tells her to just leave. Tia pulls out a note from her purse and shows it to him. She tells him that she wants this taken care of. Rhys is confused after reading the small note. He starts to ask her on why she has chosen him, as there are plenty of people who'd be willing to do this job for 1/10 of that sum. Why is she using his younger siblings and threatening him? She replies stating that she desires perfect results. She knows that it'll be better if she can get him to work for her as well. She puts the note back into her purse and closes it. Ray sighs and then tells Tia on how he can't fathom how nobles like her think. He understands and tells her that in 2 days' time, she will hear the news. Tia tells him on how he doesn't need to get in touch. She then leaves the liquor store with Frail. Frail questions her on what her request was. She stops and turns around to tell Frail that it was a request to eliminate a trail. Frail and Tia head to a restaurant. Tia asks Frail that if he is worried about being recognized, why doesn't he wear a mask? Frail asks her if she is joking, to which Tia turns around to give him a mask and he realizes that she is serious. She then tells him on how she doesn't think anyone would recognize him, but if he's nervous, then he can wear it. Frail tells her that it's all right, and it's not like he is Alphonse. Frail asks Tia if this is her restaurant, to which Tia tells him that it's more like her building than her restaurant. He asks her on when she had purchased it. She replies stating that she bought it when she obtained the key to the Rosen Estate vault. Frail knows that it's public knowledge about how the Rozon family owns 8 estates in the capital. It's unusual for a single entity to own such a large pool of assets. He was unaware that they were also buying Main Street buildings. Tia and Frail head inside the sitting room, and Tia mentions to him on how she thinks they'll have some time left over. She pulls back a chair to sit down and tells him that he can ask her any questions. He starts off by asking her if she does a lot of undercover work. She responds, stating that she is sure the people of Lord Cedric are not used to secrecy. If he's asking if there will be secrets because of her, then the answer is yes. As she is pouring tea, she tells him that so far, Lord Cedric has been too honest. Someone has to be in charge of keeping secrets. Frail responds, stating that honesty is a good thing and how Lord Cedric is a good man. She responds by telling him that she also knows this. Lord Cedric's words are trustworthy, and he is honorable, but in reality his only position is to wander the battlefields. Frail was surprised to hear that Tia thought that about Lord Cedric. Tia asks him if he really thinks the Emperor sent Lord Cedric to the Western Front in the hopes that he would merely earn military acclaim. Before he is able to answer her question, someone opens the door to interrupt their discussion. A person named Lexin barges in, and the guards tell him on how he shouldn't be so rude. He tells the guards on how he doesn't mean to do anything bad. He only wishes to speak to Tia. Frail starts to get into his battle stance. Tia tells the guards to let him go. Lexin tells her on how she is a difficult person to meet with. He continues by stating that he has been telling the guards that he needed to see her in person, but her representative didn't listen to him. Tia tells him to calm down and sit. He apologizes and states that he's just a bit tired. He then goes on by saying that Tia wanted him to divorce his wife in exchange for control of the farmland. He thought this was unreasonable. Tia tells him on how there is a misunderstanding as she has no interest in the Lexin family. Lexin bangs his right hand on the table and tells her that her representative asked her to divorce his wife and marry her. Tia interrupts him and asks him if he really thinks that the Western farmland is worth that much. She is simply buying his title, and she thought that he was aware of this. We then learn about how this low-ranking noble from the western part of the country was in such dire straits that he was willing to sell his title. He has no influence or reputation and will go unnoticed even if he disappeared. So instead of buying his position, it's more beneficial to buy the name of Madame Lexin. Tia starts to think about how the wife of a native nobleman will have more social advantages than a foreigner who buys a title. Lexin tells her on how he can't abandon his wife. Tia responds by stating to go bankrupt together. If he wants to stay together, the two of them will then face many problems. Suddenly the door opens and the pastor walks in. He tells Tia on how no matter how informal, wearing a black veil to the wedding is a bit much. He then places a bunch of documents on the table in front of Lexin. He tells him on how they are the divorce documents and marriage vows. He notices that his wife has already signed the papers. He realizes that he doesn't have a choice after all. He decides to sign the papers as well. After Lexin finishes signing the documents, the pastor announces that the marriage has been formally established before God. He congratulates the both of them. He then gives them a gift as a token of his gratitude. Once the pastor and his assistant leave, Tia tells Lexin on how his property manager will organize the rest of his money and tell him where to go. She hopes for him to spend the rest of his life living quietly and happily with his wife, away from the public. Lexin leaves and shuts the door behind him. Frail glances at Tia and starts to think about how the marriage vows were signed under the name of Terry Ford. It probably isn't Tia's fake name. Whoever they are, they're likely her close-eyed. He couldn't believe that this was the work of an 18-year-old maiden who only just escaped from her oppressive mother's clutches. They suddenly hear a knock on the door. The door opens and a mysterious lady walks into the room. Please make sure to comment, subscribe, and turn on the bell for notifications. Why not check out the story of the Frozen player who returns as a hunting machine by watching this video right here?